will refrain from harming sentient beings. Sentient beings are those with feeling and consciousness. Some Buddhists interpret this precept strictly and practice vegetarianism and refuse to kill any form of sentient life. Others, realizing the great difficulty of living in this world without taking life, strive to minimize the amount of harm they do. If they eat meat, as many Buddhists do, they allow others to do the slaughtering so as not to reap the negative karma themselves. The second precept intends to minimize harming by respecting the possession of others. Practitioner vows, "I will refrain from taking what is not offered." In other words, one promises not to steal or even covet. The third precept concerns the potential harm one might cause in the area of sexuality, and the aspirant promises that I will refrain from sexual misconduct. The fourth precept concerns the misuse of language. I will refrain from false speech. False speech in Buddhism is not only lying and slandering, but also gossiping, cursing, loud talk, idle chatter, and meaningless babble. As part of a course that I teach in comparative spiritual practices, I require my students to participate in a number of disciplines from various religions, including a day of abstaining from false speech. Invariably, they tell me that abstaining from false speech is the hardest of all. It's even harder, they say, than being totally silent for a day. Try it yourself. Take a day and refrain from lying, exaggerating, gossiping, and pointless conversation, and note how often you are unsuccessful at it. The fifth precept regards the use of intoxicants. I will refrain from stupefying drink. Not only does alcohol and substance abuse often result in addiction, it can also dull the senses, hindering the capacity to see the world and oneself clearly. The other aspects of moral practice in Buddhist spirituality follow the basic principles of right action. Right speech means communicating in the most generous and beneficial way possible. While the 5 precepts enjoin the practitioner to refrain from false speaking, right speech encourages kind, gentle, and edifying speech. Harsh and bitter language, sarcasm, and meaningless chatter do not promote the habits of compassion. Right living means one should earn a living in ways that foster the well-being of others rather than their harm. The Buddha specifically named military service, trading in intoxicants or poisons, and selling animals for slavery or slaughter as particularly unwholesome occupations. He obviously believed that the spiritual life extended to every aspect of one's life, including the workaday world. Skillful moral behavior is essential to the holy life, but the Buddha considered it equally important to cultivate the mind. Just as self-centered habits obscure the basic compassion of the human heart, diluted patterns of thinking hinder the ability to understand the world. To appreciate the importance of mental discipline, we'll briefly discuss how the Buddha understands the mind, and then we'll consider the specific techniques he offers for guiding the mind in the quest to end suffering. Like all else, the Buddha did not think of mind as a static reality, nor did he identify it with the brain. For the Buddha, the mind meant the totality of thoughts, sensations, feelings, and consciousness that in each moment arise and fall away. The phrase stream of consciousness comes very close to capturing the Buddhist sense of mind, although the Buddhist sense is much broader than the literary or psychological use of this term. The mind, according to the Buddha, has great power and potential, but in its unenlightened state, it's out of control. It's unruly and it's undisciplined. The Buddha likens it to an untamed horse. Until it's tamed, it's more likely to cause harm than to do good. But to bring it under control requires patience, skill, and persistent training. The characteristics of the undisciplined mind may sound familiar. The undisciplined mind has a hard time staying attentive to one thing. It lacks the ability to concentrate for more than a few minutes, if that long. It craves stimulation, particularly the kinds of things that will bring it pleasure or to help it avoid uncomfortable thoughts and sensations. It tends to move from place to place, idea to idea, seeking new pleasures or stimuli. The conditioned mind has an inordinate love of thoughts, which is part of its attachment to stimulation. It constantly generates ideas and images, the vast majority of which is pure garbage. Most of these thoughts pertain either to the past or the future, which means not much attention is given to the present. Dwelling in the past, we often experience regret over what we did or did not do. Dwelling in the future, we often experience fear and anxiety about things that we expect to come, but that rarely come to pass. The mind spends a lot of time thinking about things over which we have no control. When the undisciplined mind does pay attention to the present, it's constantly passing judgments and generating opinions so that it's really more absorbed with itself than with the present situation. It's as if the mind produces a kind of constant commentary as we experience life. Finally, the mind is a creature of habit. It easily finds itself returning to the same old patterns of thinking. This is how it gets conditioned in the first place. But the good thing about this tendency is that the mind can be trained to develop wholesome habits. And this is what the Buddha's discipline of mental cultivation intends to do. The three disciplines of right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness are ways of training the mind and harnessing its considerable powers for the benefit of ourselves and for others. Right effort means giving deliberate attention to developing positive qualities and thoughts and to letting go of negative ones. What counts as positive here are those states that promote the alleviation of suffering. Those characteristics include generosity, friendliness, equanimity, patience. Right concentration is the practice of meditation. Right mindfulness is the practice of meditative awareness taken into the daily life. The Buddha advocated taking time each day to practice meditation, to strengthen attentiveness and non-attachment. Attentiveness and non-attachment and other Buddhist virtues were regarded as skills that anyone could develop and reinforce. Like learning to play the piano, it is essential to set aside time to practice regularly. The Buddhist practice of meditation is not intended to create extraordinary or mystical experiences, although that may happen. Rather, the Buddha meant for meditation to be used to sharpen the awareness of the world and of ourselves by attending to the features of ordinary life in the present moment. The basic meditation practice taught by the Buddha was based on his own experiences under the rose apple tree and the Bodhi tree. It involved simply attending to the breath and observing without judgment the rise and fall of thoughts, sensations, feelings, and perceptions. As these phenomena rise to awareness, the meditator notes them and allows them to fall away without grasping or dwelling on them. By merely observing the mind, the body, and the world around, the Buddha thought it possible to gain insight into the true nature of the world and the self, and to learn how to act and think accordingly. He believed this practice would reveal the illusory nature of self and the source of suffering in the mind's tendencies to grasp for new pleasures and to avoid unpleasant experiences. He also thought that meditation could restrain the mind's inclination to make knee-jerk judgments and to get absorbed in thoughts about the future and the past, all of which he thought were unwholesome habits. The techniques and benefits of meditation practice are much more than we could discuss here, so I'll have to let this brief description suffice. There are many excellent written works on Buddhist meditation, and I have listed some of the best of these in the study guide. As I suggested earlier, we can distinguish between two kinds of right understanding. The second form is awakened understanding, the content of the enlightenment experience. It means to directly see reality as it is, unencumbered by expectation, belief, or defilements of any kind. In the Buddha's view, this form of comprehension meant to know for certain the authenticity of the Four Noble Truths without reliance on authorities other than one's own experience. To realize the Dhamma at this level means to live one's life in accord with the truth. One no longer aspires to nibbana. Nibbana has been seen.